Hello guys, welcome back to another episode here on African Confessions. There is a message that I received, then I had to ask one of our admins to give us a translation, and the translation reads like this. Hello my brother, how are you? How are you doing? I've been busy and I have not found time to respond to your email. In the previous mail, there was one who asked me if there is any more stories, since it seems as if your audience had a lot of questions to ask me. Let me tell you something. All of these stories that I am going to tell you, indeed, they remind me of the darkness that once covered my life, and I do not rejoice whenever I am giving this testimony. So many lives were lost, and I caused so much misery in different people's life. I am not proud of these confessions, but I hope that my story will help in opening other people's eyes. So let me share my story. At that time, when I was still staying in Mozambique, then there was this other witch doctor. That witch doctor was in Zim. Then there was this other client of mine. He was quite a rich man, so he used to give me a lot of money. Then all of a sudden, that man stopped coming to Mozambique for consultations and stuff like that, because I was more like their personal doctor. So this bothered me a lot. I had to send some of my small boys, the spiritual boys that I used. I sent them from Mozambique to Zim so that they can go and spy on that man and see why was he not coming back to Mozambique so that he can consult with me. When my small boys went to Zim after they had followed that man for a couple of months, then they came and reported back to me, and they showed me everything that they had seen in the mirror. In the vision, I saw my client at his house. At that time, before he had gone broke, he was staying in an area that is called Horton Park. Then he went to this other witch doctor who was said to be very powerful at that time. This witch doctor, he was staying somewhere in an area called Highfields. When he went there, I saw that I heard that this man was gossiping about me as if he wanted to impress his new witch doctor, and this made me to feel so jealousy. So I packed up my stuff after I had spoken with my brother who was staying in Zim. I told him that there were some of my few clients that I wanted to visit in Zim, so he had to prepare a place for me. But my brother didn't know that I had other evil intentions. When I was traveling from Mozambique coming to Zim, the intentions that I had was to be in direct competition with that witch doctor who had stolen my client. Once I had arrived in Zim, I then went and I spoke with that witch doctor that had stolen my client. I told that witch doctor that was staying in Highfields at that time, and I said to him, I am going to cause some afflictions on one of your clients, for he is my client. All of his wealth, he got it from me. Then that witch doctor said that if I want this client, we should test each other for powers. And he said that the reason why my client had ran away from me and was now consulting with him, it was because my client had seen that he was more powerful than I was. So I went back home and I mixed some black herbs. After I had mixed some black herbs, I then sent my small boys so that they can go and place those black herbs in that man's house in Horton Park, because I wanted his children to get sick. And I knew that if they would get sick, if he will go around and if he will not find any solution, he was going to come back to me. After I had sent my boys to go and drop those herbs, then that man who was now his new witch doctor rushed to his place, and that witch doctor told him that it was me who was causing all of these problems that he was facing in his household. That was when I decided to go into direct competition with that witch doctor that was trying to steal this client away from me. Then one sunny day, that is when we decided to have our battle. So out of nowhere, the clouds just gathered, but I was more powerful than that witch doctor. The witch doctor just got hit by lightning, and it was me that sent the lightning if I ever get the chance, I will tell you of the stories of how I used to make this lightning, the lightning that is not sent by God, but lightning that is created using black magic, so that you can strike down people's houses, property, and things like that. After that witch doctor had died, I then decided to place a curse on that man. At that time, this client of mine, he was a businessman, but all of his businesses went broke. And the curse that I put on him was that I said that, yes, indeed, even though he had a very nice house in Horton Park, but I wanted him to go back where he came from, because he grew up in the villages without nothing. And when I placed the curse on him, I said, you are going to leave the city and you will return back to your people in the village, and you will never get out of the village until the day that you die. That is how I cursed my former client with the spirit of poverty. Whilst I was staying at my brother's place, a lot of people, they used to come and consult with me. One time, a high school student came with her mother. This was after a boy in her class had made fun of her. According to her, she said that the boy had drew her on the chalkboard, and the following morning, as everyone entered into the class, they started to laugh at her. You know, high school kids, they always bully each other. After her mother had paid for the consultation fee, this thing happened on a Tuesday morning, and the girl and the mother, they came to me in the evening. She was very sad, and I felt sorry for her. Then I asked for the boy's name, and I got all the information, but the name was not good enough for me. So what I told them was that tomorrow morning, when this girl will go back to school, what I wanted her to do was that the place where that boy that was always bullying her had stepped, she was supposed to go to that place and pick up the soil, but she was not supposed to touch the soil with her hands. Rather, what she was supposed to do was to look for a plastic. Then she had to use that plastic as a hand glove. Then after she had picked up the soil, she should make sure that her skin should never get in contact with the soil that she would have picked up. So the following evening, they came back with the soil. So I took the soil, then I gave that girl a piece of paper. She then wrote the name of that boy. Then I started to mix the soil and that piece of paper that had the boy's name written on it. After that, I told them that it was all sorted out. They were supposed to go back to their house. Everything was going to be okay. After they had left, I waited until it was almost midnight. Then I went outside and I started to call out to my little boys, my small boys, my two bodyguards. After my two spiritual boys had came out, I then told them the mission that I wanted them to complete. I told them the name of that boy. Then I gave them the soil. The reason why I had told that girl not to let her skin get into contact with the soil that she had picked up, it was because my two small boys, when I sent them on a mission, when they will be on the mission, they'll be busy sniffing the soil as if they were hunting dogs. That is why I didn't want that girl's skin to get into contact with the soil. But I don't know how that girl had messed it up, because after I had sent my two spiritual boys to go and attack that boy that was always bullying her, the next day I woke up and I heard her mother crying. She was crying whilst she was standing outside of my brother's yard. She was saying that I had bewitched her daughter. I then instructed her to come into the yard, not to make any more noise. I told her that if she kept on crying, I would make sure that she would never be able to speak again. I was going to cast a spell on her life. Well, they then entered into my consulting room. My brother, if I was not that powerful, that girl could be a crippled up until now, because when her mother came with her, she could not even walk. They had placed her inside a wheelbarrow. So I spoke with my two spiritual boys. Then they told me that they had gone and completed the mission, but I showed them the damage that they had done. They said that, like hunting dogs, they they had followed after their prey. And when they had entered into that room where their prey was sleeping, they started to beat up their prey. What I had not realized was that my two boys, when they had gone there, they had met another force that was much bigger than they were. But when they came back, instead of them reporting back to me, they chose to hide that truth away from me. Even though the parents were not prayerful people, but what happened is that the boy's uncle was a very powerful witch doctor. I don't know how I had not managed to see this in the vision, because when I had looked at that boy in the mirror, there was no covering that had been placed upon his life. But after I had sent my boys, I think that my boys, when they went to attack that young man, then they saw that he had a covering, but they were afraid to report back to me, because whenever they would come back to me without succeeding in the mission, there was a punishment that I used to give to them. I used to threaten to take them back to the land of the dead, because these small boys, they were actually spirits of other people that I had raised from the graveyards. So the spirits of the dead, if they do not find a resting place, they just want to remain in the land of the living. They don't want to go to a land where it is a barren land. So whenever these small boys of mine could not complete a mission, this is the way that I used to threaten them. I will threaten them by saying that I will take you back to the land of the dead. So on that night when they returned, they didn't even want to tell me about how they had failed to succeed in the mission. After 2 months, my brother, that is when I had a stroke. What happened is that one evening I was dreaming. On that day, I felt so tired. So I told myself that let me go to bed early. But there is something that happened on that evening. So that powerful walking stick that I had gotten in Mutoko, I used to go with it everywhere I would go. Even when I will be sleeping, the walking stick will be right next to my bed so that it can protect me from other witches and other witch doctors that I used to fight with. But on that night, I felt so exhausted because a lot of people had came to consult with me. So I rushed to bed without even taking my walking stick. I just left it in my consultation room. As I was asleep in my dream, I then saw this other witch doctor. When he entered into the room that I was sleeping, I knew that my life was over, because all over his body there were snakes, different types of snake, poisonous snakes. They were coming from all over his body. He then commanded one snake, which was a king cobra. Then he commanded that snake to end my life. That snake climbed from his back. Then it came to the place where I was helplessly sleeping. I was paralyzed and I could not do anything about it. Then that snake injected its poison into my body. After that, I became blind. When the morning came, I could not speak and I could not see and I could not walk. So when my brother and the other people that I used to work with, my assistants, when they saw that I was not waking up, because what I used to do is that before the sunrise, I would wake up so that I can strengthen my powers just before the sun rises. When my assistants came to the room where I was sleeping, and when they kept on knocking, and when they saw that there was no answer, they thought that I was dead. They then decided to break the door. When they entered into the room where I was sleeping, they found me paralyzed, blind, and I could not talk. So they took a piece of paper, and one of my assistants placed a pen in my hand, and I knew what they wanted me to do. All that I wrote on that piece of paper is that Mozambique. And they knew that they had to take me back to Mozambique as soon as possible. That is how I survived, because when I returned back to Mozambique, I then went to this other guy who helped me so that I can regain my sight. But this thing didn't happen overnight. It took several weeks for the poison that had been inserted into my body to be fully removed. And the way that it was removed in a very painful way. This man, he had his other snake that he used to use. He had a python that he used to heal the sick. So what this friend of mine used to do is that he would take me into this other room where he used to heal his clients. Then I had to sleep on the floor. This I did whilst I was naked. Then the snake would come, then it will wrap itself around my stomach. So what it will do is that it will go for my manhood and it will start to suck the poison that had been injected into my body. This was quite a painful thing because as the snake will be sucking out the poison, I felt as if there was someone who was pushing a needle into my manhood. But I had to stay strong, for I wanted to regain my sight and I wanted to walk again. Hi, dear listeners, right there was a message that we received from our dear brother. Then I had to ask one of our admins to give us a translation.